Everything has changed. We're now in a different time, different attitude, and we must be prepared for the new threat. This program is going to examine the chemical and biological terrorism threat and what businesses and individuals can do to prepare for such an event. We're not going to discuss the political climate or what governments are doing to reduce the threat, as this may take months or years to perfect. Our goal is to make you aware of potential threats and offer some basic ideas on preparing for reducing the exposure. Let's begin with taking a look at some of the basic aspects of chemical and biological threats, what they are, and what we can do to protect ourselves. You should always follow your company's policies and procedures relating to workplace security and safety. This program is simply to make you more aware of these threats and offer basic guidelines. The information we are providing has been obtained from experts in the field of terrorism, the Center for Disease Control, and the federal government. Before we begin, we must say there are experts in the field that believe that chemical and biological terrorism are not practical due to the enormous support required, availability, and dispersal of toxins or viruses. We'll try to present a balance between the differing opinions.
Chemical and biological attacks are called the poor man's weapons of mass destruction. Biological and chemical weapons are, unlike nuclear arms, relatively easy to produce, hide, and use. Let's look at some of the types of chemical weapons. Irritant gases may cause permanent injury or death. Examples include chlorine, PHOSGENE, and mustard gas, which were used in World War I. Tear gases, such as CS gas used in riot control, affect the lungs and eyes, causing temporary blindness. Nerve gases are organophosphorus compounds similar to insecticides, which are taken into the body through the skin and lungs and break down the action of the nervous system. Incapacitants are drugs designed to put an enemy temporarily out of action by, for example, impairing vision or inducing hallucinations. They have not so far been used. Toxins are poisons to be eaten, drunk, or injected. For example, ricin, derived from the castor oil plant, and the botulism toxin. Ricin has been used in individual cases. Herbicides are defoliants used to destroy vegetation sheltering troops and the crops of hostile populations. Binary weapons are two chemical components that become toxic in combination after the shell containing them is fired. VX, considered one of the most lethal chemical weapons, is a colorless and odorless liquid that turns into a gas on contact with oxygen. VX is primarily toxic through the skin, but can also prove fatal when inhaled. VX is fast-moving, virtually undetectable, and can spread through the air as well as water. In its liquid state, it is roughly the same density as water. It blocks the transmission of impulses along the central nervous system, causing convulsions, respiratory paralysis, and death. The lethal amount is about 10 milligrams, just a drop. Symptoms include increased salivation, coughing, runny nose, headache, and nausea. Prevention for VX is a gas mask and protective clothing. Sarin is a highly toxic gas, which attacks the central nervous system. In 1995, a sarin terrorist attack in the Tokyo subway system killed 12 people and injured over 5,000 civilians. Sarin is chiefly absorbed through the respiratory tract, but can be absorbed through the skin at higher environmental temperatures. Depending upon concentration of sarin, toxicity can occur within minutes. The lethal amount is about 100 milligrams. For an idea how much this is, about 29,000 milligrams equals 1 ounce. Symptoms in low levels causes severe headaches, increased salivation, and constrict air passages to the lungs. In higher doses, it causes coughing, increased perspiration, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and breathing difficulties. Death can follow due to suffocation. Prevention of a sarin attack is a gas mask. Mustard gas is in its pure form a colorless, odorless liquid, but when mixed with other chemicals it looks brown and has a garlic-like smell. Inhaling the vapors causes painful, long-lasting blisters all over the body. Symptoms are itchy skin, watery eyes, and burning sensation in lungs. The long-term effects on an individual may include chronic lung impairment, chest pain, and cancer of the mouth, throat, respiratory tract, and skin. It has been linked to causing leukemia and birth defects. Mustard gas used in World War I proved to be very devastating chemical warfare. Prevention is a gas mask. A biological weapon would have a more devastating impact since people infected with the biological agent can spread the disease for months and over a broad geographical region. One person infected with smallpox, for example, could pass along the disease to 20 or more individuals. In this way, the disease could spread broadly and rapidly. Conversely, a chemical weapon would only affect people who are near the place of its release, and the chemical would dissipate with time. Some experts think suicide terrorists could resort to spreading smallpox by infecting themselves and then wandering and breathing among large groups of people. But in that scenario, large numbers of people still might not be affected since infection rates vary among people and because people infected by the virus are highly infectious only 7 to 10 days following the outbreak of a rash. Experts say it remains very difficult to transform a deadly virus or bacterium into a weapon that can be effectively dispersed. A bomb carrying a biological agent could likely destroy the germ as it explodes. Dispersing the agents with aerosols is challenging because biomaterials are often wet and can clog sprayers. Right now, scientists are most concerned about smallpox and anthrax. Both are bacteria that can spread through the air in a powder and cause swift, deadly diseases. Smallpox could be even more lethal because it's easily spread from one person to another. Also worrisome are the bubonic plague, botulism, tularemia, and Ebola biologics. Anthrax is bacteria with spore-forming rods, likes to live in the soil. Humans become infected by coming into contact with spores either by touch or inhalation. The spore then produces a toxin that can be fatal. The incubation period for inhalation anthrax is 1 to 6 days. The lethal amount is 1/1,000,000th of a gram, the size of a speck of dust. Anthrax tends to degrade rapidly in sunlight. If kept in the right environmental conditions, anthrax can survive for years. Symptoms include flu-like symptoms, high fever, fatigue, and cough. Shock and death can occur within 24 to 36 hours of the onset of severe symptoms. Treatment includes the use of antibiotics, including penicillin, and prevention is the anthrax vaccine. The vaccine requires several injections over a period of time to be effective. Botulinum is bacterium that develops only in the absence of oxygen. It works by inhalation. Botulism neurotoxins generally kill by the relatively slow onset, hours to days, of respiratory failure. The individual may not show signs of disease for 24 to 72 hours. The toxin blocks biochemical action in the nerves that activates the muscles necessary for respiration, causing suffocation. The lethal amount is considered 1/1,000,000th of a gram. It has a relatively short life after it's released, and symptoms include dizziness, dry throat, and blurred vision. Treatment is to inject antitoxins soon after exposure to a lethal dose of toxin. Prevention is a gas mask and protective clothing. How do you prepare for a biological threat? The Department of Defense has started vaccinating some members of the military against anthrax, but there are no such vaccination supplies for the general population. The Center for Disease Control has enough stockpiles of smallpox vaccines to medicate 12 to 15 million people. Additional supplies are now being manufactured. There is a vaccine against the bubonic plague, but it needs to be administered during a 4 to 7 month period before exposure. There is some concern that the smallpox vaccine may not be effective because it is about 40 years old and has likely degraded over time. This may also be true for people who received a smallpox vaccine in their youth. There is also the danger that terrorists could develop new strains of smallpox and anthrax. The time required to develop and establish a new vaccine is estimated to be about 36 months. Rapid detection of a disease outbreak also remains a problem, since many doctors have not been trained in how to recognize early symptoms of anthrax and smallpox. This is why emergency personnel training is so important. Early symptoms of anthrax can appear as a simple flu. The early signs of smallpox become more obvious about 3 days following exposure when lesions begin appearing. Secretary of Health and Human Services Tommy Thompson stated on September 30, 2001, that there are 8 secret locations within the United States where 50 tons of supplies such as antibiotics, vaccines, and gas masks are stored and ready for emergency deployment at each location. Included in these emergency packages are more than 7,000 emergency personnel who are trained medical doctors, scientists, researchers, and others who can respond to such emergencies. These units could serve up to 2 million people for 60 days of treatment. Secretary Thompson also stated that there is a major push now to provide training and support for local, state emergency responders and hospitals to provide adequate response. Most experts believe the United States is adequately prepared for a chemical attack, since such attacks can usually only target a limited area. Appropriate gas masks can protect a person from breathing in a deadly chemical, and protective clothing can prevent exposure through the skin. An example of a potential chemical disaster occurred on December 23, 1984. On that date, the world's worst industrial disaster took the lives of 2,500 people and injured about 400,000, with the toll still rising to this day. Methyl isocyanate gas escaped into the air and drifted 8 kilometers downwind over the city of Bhopal, India, with a population of 900,000, which poisoned all in its path. Biological and chemical agents can be dispersed in the air we breathe, the water we drink, or on surfaces we physically contact. Other than the simple manual application of an agent to food and water, air dispersion methods may be as simple as opening a container or through more sophisticated dispersal devices. The sarin gas attack in Tokyo used plastic bags. Terrorists could make use of many initiating systems, from timed to remote control, that would function a variety of dispersal mechanisms like an ordinary garden sprayer, an explosive charge, or other means. In most cases, there are observable signatures of a chemical agent release. First responders can be equipped with real-time chemical detectors that can identify chemical agents. Biological agents are difficult to classify or identify as they are usually colorless and odorless. Presently, there is limited equipment for real-time biological agent detection and identification. Monitors are being developed to fill this gap. Responders will soon have the detectors to immediately indicate the presence of a biological agent. However, samples must be collected, taken to a lab, then cultured to identify the pathogen. The whole process can take several hours. Biological agents can be dispersed by an aerosol spray, which must be inhaled. However, these agents can also be used to contaminate food, water, and other products. Attention to basic food hygiene is very important. Some chemical agents may be volatile, but evaporating rapidly to form clouds of the chemical agent. Others may be persistent. These agents may act directly on the skin, lungs, or your membranes, or be absorbed through your skin or lungs, causing injury. Proper protective equipment and clothing can provide protection. When properly used, appropriate masks are effective protection to prevent the inhalation of either biological or chemical agents. However, this assumes an adequate warning. Gas masks alone do not protect agents that act through skin absorption. There is an incubation period after exposure to biological agents. It is essential that you seek appropriate care for illnesses acquired to assure prompt diagnosis and treatment. Anthrax is susceptible to treatment if that treatment is initiated promptly after exposure. The post-exposure treatment consists of certain antibiotics administered in combination with the vaccine. What can you do personally to help reduce the threat and protect yourself from chemical and biological terrorism. To protect yourselves, learn more about the threat and keep informed. The more you know, the more you can use your good judgment and common sense in case of emergency. Always follow company security and safety plans, rules, and regulations. Be aware of unusual or suspicious incidents and report these to proper officials. Awareness is extremely important because there are not enough law enforcement personnel to see or notice everything. You are an important part of the program. Help inform others through training and education. Inspect your workplace and your homes. Check to see if there are items that you can correct or improve upon. Emergency planning and preparedness are critical at work and at home. Gas masks for everyone at work and home may be an overstated response, but each organization and individual should evaluate these needs through preparedness. Work with your local emergency responders, hospitals, and law enforcement to develop emergency plans and drills. Experts recommend that you have adequate space at work or in your home that can be sealed off from biological or chemical emergencies. Don't forget that ventilation systems should be shut down and sealed in case of emergency. There are filters that can adequately protect heating and cooling systems from biological exposure, so you should determine if this meets your preparedness needs. It's very important to understand that your community or your company should be prepared for 24 hours of self-sufficiency. This means not expecting any formal assistance for 24 hours. Basically, your organization should prepare as you would for any emergency, including tornadoes, hurricanes, and earthquake.
Without proper preparation and readiness, the results could be disastrous. Emergency training preparation at home and at work are your best defenses and protection from chemical and biological terrorism. The most important ingredient in reducing the threat is not to panic. Be prepared, be concerned and vigilant, but don't panic. You must take the responsibility to not take security for granted. This is a new war, and there is much to be accomplished. Reducing the threat and consequences of terrorism are things that must and will be done. You can help by being trained, prepared, and above all, vigilant. Thank you.